Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Well, thank you, everyone. My name is Ben Bertram, and I'm the program director and lead arborist here at TreeFolks. I'll be your host for today. Thank you, everyone, so much for attending the 2022 Urban Forest Steward Summit. For those of you who are not familiar, TreeFolks is a community forestry nonprofit whose mission is to empower Central Texans to build stronger communities through planting and caring for trees. We do this through multiple programs and outreach where we plant trees, adopt free trees to Austin and the surrounding areas, and educate people about trees. One of the main ways that we do that is through our education program. I just want to list a couple of the facts and figures here too for folks to get a sense of the scale and the volume of the work that we've been doing over the past 30 plus years. I'm curious, today we're here to talk about the UFS group, the UFS Summit. Are there anybody here who has graduated from the UFS course? And if you have, please put your year in the chat. Quite a few here. For those of you who are not familiar with UFS, the Urban Forest Stewards program, UFS, is a chance for community members to become educated and trained on the workings of our urban forest ecosystem. From tree biology and tree care to placemaking and ecosystem services, these informative and interactive adult education sessions are designed to inspire the confidence and actions required to become a steward of our urban forest. Graduates of the course and workshops become active leaders in their communities and become a resource for the next generation of urban forest stewards in Central Texas. So if you're interested in learning more about UFS or becoming a UFS student, this course is available for free year-round, and we're always looking for more stewards. So email TreeFolks education@treefolks.org. So I just want to run briefly over the agenda for today. I know a lot of you are here to hear Jill Nokes, and I'm also very excited. And that will be coming up very shortly. I'm going to do a brief meeting norms discussion before we get started. So for the meeting itself, we're going to hear Jill lecture about the history of the Central Texas landscape, more specifically exploring the continuing decline of the woodlands of the Edwards Plateau and what you can do about it. Jill really wants this to be a conversation. So I'll talk a little bit more about how we can do that in just a moment. Here, Jill's presentation, we're going to learn about a project from a previous urban forest steward graduate, class of 2015, Stephanie Simmons, who will talk about her work to increase canopy cover around Austin. Then we're going to have a Q&A for Stephanie after that. Then we'll transition into honoring the graduates of the 2022 Urban Forest Steward class. And then lastly, we'll close with announcements and resources available going forward. I have a brief, before I get into the introduction and introducing Jill, I have a brief bit of housekeeping. During the meeting, during the talk, Jill wants this to be a conversation. So if you have a question, either post it in the chat and we can ask it for you. Jillian, another member of TreeFolks, is here and she'll be asking the questions on your behalf. Or if you want to ask the questions, excuse me, or if you would like to ask the question, please raise your hand so we can call on you and unmute you. I think the group size is large enough to where you may not be able to unmute yourself. So for those of you who are not familiar, here's a quick way on how to raise your hand. Let's go ahead and practice just for a minute. It's not quite as easy as raising your hand in real life. There's Jillian doing it now. You can either hit Alt-Y if you're on a PC, or you can look down and go to the reactions with that and raise your hand. I see Craig's, Shannon. Okay, Shannon, great. Great, okay. Yeah, it looks like it's working. Okay, good. All right, so if everybody can lower their hand now, same way that you raised your hand. I think we got it. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jill Oaks. Jill Oaks earned her master's degree at Texas A&M, where she explored the production and use of native plants in landscaping. She authored the popular go-to guide, How to Grow Plants of Texas, How to Grow Native Plants of Texas and the Southwest, and has become a vocal proponent of restorative land use practices in recent years, often consulting with landowners on restoration, ecology, conservation management, and naturalistic design. Jill is going to guide us through the historic landscape of Central Texas, more specifically, the Edwards Plateau. Jill, take it away, please.
Thank you. We'll wait for the first slide to come up, and all right. I want to thank everybody for being here. I have been on many Zooms, but I haven't really taught on those Zooms. So bear with me if it seems a little freelance or seat of the pants, because it's exactly what it is. But I wanted to begin by commending all of you urban forestry stewards for embarking on this journey of learning about trees and learning how to teach others about trees, because really this is the work. I think our tree lovers, people who want to do this work, are born, not made, and it's a calling. And it's a calling that's really depends on you being an optimist, because the work that you do, you're likely never to really see it in full completion of a tree, of a life's tree. So that gesture, that action that offers hope for a future that you won't see is a very beautiful thing. And I think this should be your lodestar as you participate on so many programs that TreeFolks, or if you do it with the Parks Foundation or neighborhood project, whatever it is, you will be the person that might unlock the door for another person to get in touch with their inner druid and carry a lifelong love of showing others what they can learn and benefit from trees. So first, I want to thank you. Our city needs that. It needs you. And it's very important to just hang on to that deeper meaning of what it means, this work means. So this is the first slide is me. Well, I'm going to tell a little bit about myself so you'll know more the direction that I'm coming from, because there are many ways to arrive at being an advocate for trees, urban canopy, or even rural projects. I was in school here at UT, and I started working for the Rare Plant Study Center, which was in the 70s when the first law about rare and endangered species was passed, and we were working in the herbarium looking for those populations of things that would meet those new measurements of rare, endangered, or threatened. And then I started growing in a greenhouse with this. They had a very grand idea that we'd find these plants, we'd assess their condition today, but compared to when they were collected, and then try to reintroduce them into the wild. So that was a very long time ago, but that was how I got into it. And then I wrote my book, and I revised it later on and wrote a third book about vernacular gardens and placemaking. But I started doing landscape design, residential and commercial, and then gradually over the years during this whole era of wealth creation and people had second homes, I started working with those folks and who had the resources to really become stewards for the property, not just the home they were going to build or the big home or whatever, and helping them with their wildlife management plan and so on and so forth, because they didn't have to make a living off the land, yet they could have a big impact on regional watersheds and things like that. And it's about the same time that in the early 2000s, I started getting involved with Austin Parks and the very a small organization that was in the Austin Parks Foundation, because our parks were just really lacking for advocates. Nobody wanted to be an advocate for Mother Nature. We had a lot of facilities and a lot of acreage for Austin, but many of our parks were and are in decline. And so I started with Pease Park and begged the parks director to come see what was going to happen there, because it was crashing literally through the lack of management, oversight, and stewardship. And that's another long story, but it really has turned out to be very rewarding for me to help jumpstart the Parks Foundation. I was president then, and then also more citywide activities, which I'm sure TreeFolks participates in, and that has been great. And then 13 years ago, we bought some land in Southwest Llano County. That's as a crow flies, about 8 miles from Enchanted Rock. And we took on this really beat up, hammered acreage and have been trying to repair it and get it in a healthy condition again. It's been a very intense school education, but it's to be able to have the privilege to have space like that, to get to know everything on a very intimate level over many weather cycles, has been a very rich learning experience for me. And I wanted to share you some of the pictures and ideas that I got from there. I don't have a lot of urban pictures because that was back in my former life with garden clubs and things like that. So, but these are trees that will grow anywhere in most places, and I'll show you. So this is a big American elm. I wonder if everybody recognized that tree. It's growing on the banks of a creek that feeds into the Llano River. And this tree is just so majestic. One day it's going to fall over into the creek. It's one of those big sandy granite creeks. But right now it gets to be the full majesty of American elm, very broad spreading crown. And it's on the riparian corridor of that creek. So this is an emblematic tree that I wanted to start our talk off with. And I don't know if you've done this in your workshops, but one thought exercise is to ask people, the audience, for to close their eyes for a moment and think of a place they were attached to as a child, a tree or a place. It could be a fort, it could be a tree swing, it could be a cave, it doesn't matter. And visualize that and then come back to the image of a tree. And most people have a very vivid memory of when they were a kid, that they had one special tree with a tree house in it or whatever. But the other part of the opportunity of this thought exercise is to ask people if they visualize the root zone too, which people never do. So if you want to try to teach people about how the important connection to soils and site, that's helpful. They go, oh yeah, I'm only thinking at the top, like the broccoli crown or something. Next slide. Can you do the next slide? Yeah. So I'm thinking about your programs, and this is Sarah Hensley. She was the former parks director of the Austin Parks in Austin Parks Department. And she came in really in the early 2000s when we were really working on Pease Park, just starting there. And she was the first. We couldn't even get directors to meet us in the parks. And she turned that around because she's the one that realized that cities can never have enough funding to manage and be stewards of their parkland. So it had to come through a public-private partnership. So here we are in 2009. It was such a drought year. And we got, next slide, and we got so we got a lot of people to put mulch and to plant more trees at Silver Park. So I see urban stewards as having so many hats, really. You're going to be a teacher, you're going to be a citizen scientist, you're going to try to be familiar and recognize the trees, but you don't necessarily have to be a expert on names. Naming is good if it helps you notice a tree and pay attention, but naming is not necessarily a measure of all your knowledge. That will fold in later. So there are people that like to be namers, but they don't know anything about soils or context. So be careful with that. Plus, they're always changing the scientific names. So that's frustrating. So your teacher, you have to work with people you have to understand what they're coming out to help plant trees for. What is their motivation? It might be a community work day, it might be team building exercise, it might just be neighborhood thing, but you're building kind of a social contract and connection and place attachment. And that's what will make people come back to see their tree, to do the same kind of good job of planting a tree in their own yard. I know this has worked in my neighborhood, which is Hyde Park, where we started planting trees in our park 20 years ago. And we have a big tutorial before everyone plants a tree. So they come away, well, then they train each other that day. You identify leaders, train them, and they pass it down to when they have to go for lunch or something. So it's a really powerful tool. And your challenge is always, how can we design this volunteer opportunity to make it a very good experience for people? Because honestly, some people don't even know which end of the shovel to hold. So that is a challenge too. And so let's go to the next slide. These are the volunteers. So this is a group of some of my mentors, mostly geologists, and there's David Mahler at there and there too. And we're at Honeycutt Creek in Hayes County, in Blanco County. And I wanted to say that I put this in because this is a really beautiful 1,000-acre ranch that has been under active ecological restoration or management for the last 20 years. And there's where you can really learn from people who've been studying this a long time, how our forests, our natural forests, have been in serious decline for 70 years. And before that, they were they had gone through from the 1840s through early 20th century of a huge era of clear cutting in central Texas. That was mostly harvesting hardwoods for fencing, building, and whatever, and fuel. And if have you all seen that? Is this reverse? I guess it is, right? Is this showing us? Okay, it's showing reverse. Oh, it's reverse. Can you see the title here?
Looks right.
It's Wanted Dead or Alive, or Wanted Mountain Cedars Dead or Alive by Elizabeth McGreevy. And it's an incredible book about the historic landscape of the Edwards Plateau.
I just want to jump in to say, I believe that she is here today.
Oh, good.
For your talk, I believe so. And yes, we can see the title.
I'm giving you a plug, Elizabeth. Did you notice that? But this was a project of love and devotion for a long time, and she spent so much time gathering information about what did Central Texas used to look like, and the answer was it was a mosaic. It wasn't all savanna, it wasn't all woodlands, it wasn't all prairie. It was really variable, and it's in a response today. What we're seeing today is a result of past land use practices and of the clear cutting, the total loss of topsoil. And this happens in urban sites too, as you know. So what do you have left that could support the trees that we're used to? That's what you have to know. What went on this site before? Was it a dump, a landfill dump? You don't often, things like that. Do batteries come up in the soil when you're digging? You don't know. So, but her book, Elizabeth's book, Wanted Mountain Cedars Dead and Alive, is a really good way to get the whole picture, a very detailed way. Another reason that our woodlands are in decline is because of heavy browsing. In the 60s, when Dolph Briscoe sprayed for the screwworm on cattle, it also got rid of screwworm that would keep the deer populations lower. So now the hill country is overrun with deer. In Llano County, it's been bad for 30 years. And now there's a robotic game. So you don't see the chance for regeneration is seriously diminished. And then if you compare that to some of the pressures that we have in urban settings, it's similar to that as well. And invasive species is another thing too. So let's go to the next slide. So what do trees face? What does any tree face in Central Texas for survival? Here we have the fire in Bastrop in 2011, and this is my friend Kay Rogers, and she was burned out twice. And I know that TreeFolks did a lot of planting there of loblolly pine, but what I'm wondering, and this is my question we could have at the end, you could answer me back, is what about the follow-up? Because we know here Yaupon, Chinaberry, and Chinese ligustrum just swarmed in there. And if you don't have the follow-up, how are those seedlings doing? Are they able to emerge through that heavy brush? Or what has been the response? We don't know. Next slide. And this is the Oasis pipeline fire, also in 2011, that year of high winds, low humidity, and serious drought in Kendall County, Junction, west of Junction. And you can see here that this is a year later after the fire, and there are these fiber mats with seeds in them, trying to get something to grow. But the challenge here is that persimmon or a mountain laurel resprouts, it's immediately browsed, even if it is something they don't typically browse because there's no forage. So this will be years and centuries, and it'll come back as brushland, not as a woodland. So these are some of the challenges. Let's go to the next one. And drought. This is my place. Not this year, but another year of drought. We got an inch of rain this year. That was the first rain we had since November. We have a total of 2.5 inches when we usually have 12 inches this year. So it's these trees, or any trees you plant anywhere, need to have the capacity to be as resilient as possible. And that should be a major thing in your selection of your repertoire of trees that you're going to offer and train people about, because look, the models are showing that with climate change, it's not going to maybe be as severe as the American Southwest, but it's going to be a mosaic. Some places are going to get hit really bad over and over, and some will have a mix of wet and dry years. But resiliency is really a high marker for what you want to work with. Next slide.
About that, Jill, there's a question in the chat. Do you want me to ask you the questions at the end or as we go?
You can ask it now. It's fine with me.
Okay,
go back to the picture slide. Go back to the one slide though, because we don't want to look at the letters. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
The question is from Steve Moore, and he asks, should we start planting tree species from central and southern Mexico to get the Austin urban forest ready for heat and drought from climate change?
I'm gonna touch on that in just a second, and then we'll fill it in, okay? All right, because that's a super good question, and I have a slide that kind of will pertain to that, and I'll go a little deeper when we get there. All right, next slide. So I always share with people this first kind of manifesto from the Society of Ecological Restoration in 1991, over 30 years ago. The intentional alteration of a site to establish a defined indigenous historic ecosystem that emulates the structure, functioning, diversity, and dynamics of previous ecosystems. Well, that didn't last too long because they realized that was such an aspirational and impractical and even just a built-in defeat kind of definition, because we will never be able to go back to that Garden of Eden that it was pre-settlement, and to have as our goal to restore the prairies before white men came here, or the woodlands before there was massive clear cutting of cedar and oaks. It's not going to happen. So because the soils are different, the soil ecology is different, the hydrology is different, all of those things. So it's more fair and more understandable to people to say that restoration is the process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem that has been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. And that's what you're seeing a lot. Well, in the city is very, very vivid, but you're not going to recreate pre-settlement times, but you can recreate a facsimile that functions as an untouched native ecosystem. And that sort of stresses the process part of it, and also the realistic outcome part of it. So when I think it's misleading when you see signs, we're doing restoration. You could say repair. We're doing, we're helping the land self-heal, and ecologists call that autogenic. You can remove the pressures, like in the country, it'd be like remove the cattle that are overgrazing it, removing exotic species, whatever that is, but you remove the pressures, and here it might be soil compaction in the city, or it might be wrong placement of trees or something like that. You remove those pressures so that the land over time can regenerate. And that is actually a more rewarding process than trying to buy a tree from a wholesale nursery and plant it somewhere. So I'm going to try to persuade you of that. Let's go to the next one. So this is a classic live oak motte, escarpment live oak, not the live oak on the coast, the coastal live oak. What do you notice about this tree? Take a minute and look at it. This is probably one tree, as we know. Do you notice the high browsing line? So that shows you that it's under pressure from browsing, and that likely any seedlings in the region would be browsed right away as well. Let's do the next slide. This is a live oak. Well, there were two of them there, and in the Spicewood fires of 2011, there was a section in Spicewood, many acres that were scorched really badly, but they were top killed, and where they weren't root killed, new suckers are coming up. Will those develop into an oak motte? I don't know, but historically, is that what happened after lightning strikes or something like that? Because these are fire tolerant trees, but when it gets real extreme, naturally you're going to have dieback, or we see that with other things with freezes. So these are the stories and the information that trees have to tell us if we just look around, and when we're looking, not to say I know the answer, I know the name of that tree, but why is that tree doing it, and why was natural selection powerful enough to say this is what this tree needs to do to survive? I think that's really interesting. And then we also know that live oaks can live a long time being completely hollow in most of their main trunk. It's weird, but many trees that are over 50 years, 70 years old are mostly hollow. I don't know how they do it, but that's another thing that a tree can tell you. Next slide, please. So this is a little red oak. It's actually a Texas red oak. It was a local ecotype that had at Barton Springs Nursery, but we had it. It was a 5-gallon tree, and then it was making great strides and growing, and then it just died to the roots, probably from Phytophthora or something like that, some vascular condition. And Phytophthora is everywhere always, but sometimes it just attacks a tree and it kills it to the ground, and then the new shoots come up. And that is true one out of every 3 trees that we've planted just in the kind of yard area where we are have had complete diebacks. And I don't know if that one time an arborist, forestry guy, service guy told me that the champion trees in Texas, the ones that meet those requirements of the girth of their trunk and whatnot, many of them had something happen to them as a young sapling. They were either bitten by a rabbit, they were struck by lightning, or they had fire or something. So they had to go back underground and devote their carbohydrates and everything to the root zone, and then resprout. And then so they have a low fork in the trunk or something that. But I see the trees, maybe it's just where we are because it's very arid and it's very gravelly. They go back, they regroup, they get more anchored, and then this tree it's a lot bigger now. But I find that fascinating. I've had that do with cottonwoods, sycamores, and oaks. So is that a natural pattern, or is it just some weird thing where we are? Next slide.
Jill?
Yeah.
Just can you repeat, what was that called? That dieback was called what?
Okay, it's Phytophthora. It's a
Phytophthora.
yeah. If you just let's see if I PH Ytopthora.
Okay, thanks.
And that is a name that I just, when I asked my arborist about this, like what, I knew it was vascular disease, but I didn't know what, and there's nothing you can do after it's already done that. And that's what he suggested it might be, but nobody really diagnosed it. Okay, this is in Blanco County again, and where you often see the forest regenerating is under a nurse tree or under brush that's been cut, and that's protected for browsing, but also a little shade, a little mulching, natural mulching. These are the places where trees like to come back. And so if you're working in a floodplain or a verge or a right-of-way or a park, for example, in Peace Park, about 10 years ago, there was like a weird mini cyclone. There's another word for it, a downdraft or something. It took out a lot of trees. And we had a guy come in with a forestry mower, and he cut down the broken trees and spread the mulch. And in that open field where there's more light now and everything, there are hundreds of Texas ash, cedar elms, and other things coming up. And if you can protect these, maybe you just cut out away a little from them, put some mulch around them, those trees will never need to be irrigated. And that's the issue with park planting, is that the Parks Department can't afford the water bill for perennial watering. But so and the way the park system was before we had these projects and programs of citizens helping, they had what was called, they could buy through their very onerous, procurement process, any city thing, called park grade trees, which meant they were those shitty trees that no one else wanted to buy. And they were broken, disfigured, whatever. And they planted those small size, 5 gallon, I get that. And they never came back, and they accepted like a 65% attrition rate. And to me, that was crazy. And especially if you're using volunteers to help you plant and they come back and see a dead tree, that is not good PR. So sometimes a combination approach is more effective than just one way or the other. For example, at the Browning Ranch in Johnson City, Scott grew 300 trees from seed that were native to that region. And when 2011 came, he watered them. He had a ATV with a bladder tank on. He watered them. It was so much work, but then only 50 survived after the drought. So it's very, very hard. But if you have a plant, it could be 2 inches tall, but the roots could have been there a long time because it might have been pinched back by a predator. So it's an overlooked resource, is what I'm trying to explain, that the natural recruitment occurs everywhere. And so you can maybe find it easier to care for the trees that have already decided to survive and give them a little help. Okay, next one. And we've done this at our place. We have a lot of cedar elms. And so this is a real small one, but most of them we've caged are a little taller. And we've caged over 100 trees. Now, I don't like the look of these things around in my woodlands and stuff, but I want to have the next generation of trees, and we don't see any 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot trees there. And you'd be surprised how quickly they outgrow these cages. So we're always just moving them around and doing that. All right, next one. Okay, and then there should be, for every planting plan, there should be a plan for management. And in fact, you don't ever want to start something for which you don't have an equally thought out and funded plan for coming back and following up. We would, that's my husband. He's having a really good time cutting back persimmon and whitebrush or bee brush. These are vigorous resprouters. So we find some high value trees, like some of our post oaks, that were choked out and smothered by these more vigorous growers. They're native trees, that's not a problem, but they're competing for root space and water around these aging post oaks that I really want to preserve for as long as possible. So you have to come back with these, you have to treat with triclopyr so they don't resprout, but just giving space to the brush management is very important in some regions where you're trying to increase high value trees of long duration. Okay, next one. Now we were talking about soapberries, and here's a soapberry grove. This is on the South Concho River, and this is a good, I put this in here because it's really pretty, and I have another slide that goes with it. But soapberries are maybe one of the trees that can fill in for some of our others because they're more drought tolerant. However, you have to know your tree. This tree forms by lateral shoots and underground stems. It spreads by rhizomes. So it's going to make a thicket, kind of like the Possuma Holly does, or even, what else does that? I'll think of some others. So it wouldn't be good in a yard because the landowner, the homeowner would, and the park owner, if it's in the middle, it's not going to behave like a single trunk tree. That's why we love it. Next slide. That's why we love to be under it. And this is some young ones. This is, but it's not going to act like a single tree, like in a commercial planting or something. This is a grove of live oaks. It's probably all one tree that was totally smothered in catbrier and persimmon. And we cut those out, and with more light, this has moved in. And as Bill Carr told me once, it's like his favorite understory tree because this is what it does in the fall. And by removing those other things that are rhizomatous, the tree canopy of this cluster of oaks really filled in. So that again, you set something in motion, you have a plausible assumption of what you think it will do, but then you check back and say, well, I was wrong about that. Next time I'm going to do it this way. Or, wow, I didn't know all these trees were here until we cleared it out. There was one old scrawny soapberry across the trail, but now it's a special feature, really. All right, let's go to the next one. So this is my house in the winter, but that's a redbud. I don't know if it's an Eastern redbud or a Texas redbud. It was Jack, my husband, was just mowing. We used to have grass to the curb, but we don't anymore. And he saw it and he avoided it, mowing it, and it turned into a beautiful tree. Next slide. Next slide. And then it died in the snowpocalypse because it was getting old and hollow anyway. But two other trees are now 18 feet tall, like 3 years later. So even natural regeneration like that, you train people what to look for. I never irrigate these trees. And you know, they're a good scale for a street side tree. But more importantly, for the urban foresters, you want to really know more about the provenance of the tree if it's a nursery tree that you're promoting or that you're acquiring. And because you could be, like, for example, on the website for the TreeFolks, I noticed that there was a list of trees and it said bald cypress trees like to have their feet in the water, and that's not true. If a tree came from Florida or Louisiana tree farms, and a lot of plants come from there, they would be more of the swamp. They're the ecotype that does grow in swamps, and they would look sickly and yellow. And we've all seen those bald cypresses like that here. But if it's a Central Texas, if it's from a nursery that grows from local ecotypes, you're going to have a much better chance of success. And sometimes you can't get those answers. Sometimes if you're trying to make a big push of really durable, beautiful trees, you may have to contract grow those. And that's to get the tree that's the best adapted, because conditions are getting harsher to establish a tree. And so you want to start off with something you think has a fighting chance. Next slide. This is an Anaqua tree, a sandpaper tree. And you can show the next slide too. And see how huge it is? See those power lines? My husband used to work at Laguna Gloria Museum, and they have a lot of Anaqua trees there. It kind of looks like a bushy live oak from a distance, if you're not familiar, but it's a real weird growing tree. I mean, it's a city for trees. It's for birds. It's unbelievable, but it's got real twisted branches in there, tons of flowers and fruits. It's amazing. And I never water this tree. So when he brought a root sprout back in the 80s in the late 80s from Laguna Gloria. It looked like a number 2 pencil with just an L-shaped root coming off of it. And we planted it out there, and it's been great. Used to be that Anaquas, there were a few on Town Lake, but they would get top killed or halfway killed by frost every year. But now, since we have climate change, that's not a problem. If you've ever been to Goliad or San Antonio, they really like it down there, and you could see them beautiful, majestic trees. But the issue with this is, again, learning your trees is if you're looking for a tree that's in nursery production, it's a challenge because these trees don't like to grow in a can. They're not hard to grow at all, but they're not going to ever look a standardized plant item, and since we've all gotten used to the big box stores and everything, they have plants that are regional in base, that are mass produced and kind of a generic look. So the plants that TreeFolks is going to work with are ones that are going to fill into the ecosystem and look like they belong. It's not going to jump out at you like a Arizona ash or something that looks odd. There's a place for those too, but you know what I mean? This one fits in with the fabric, and it's also a lot of benefits to wildlife, and shade is very dark. The other thing I was going to say is on your website, you have loquat, and I don't know why that's on there, because that is an invasive species. And they didn't do well in the freeze either. They're going to be those trees that grow rapidly and all those sort of things, but they're going to fill in our waterways with loquats instead of other trees that provide the food that they co-evolved with the wildlife there. So why not put Possuma Holly if you want a fruiting tree? And also, I don't think, my opinion is, let's not plant Ratama and Huisache here because it's going to freeze. That's what's going to be our pattern. It can naturally occur and be a good tree. That's fine, but I wouldn't introduce anymore. Why not introduce a mesquite tree? That's going to be more adaptable, and it's just as beautiful. Does not like to grow in a can, so it's hard to find something that can be transported and planted, but that's what citizen scientists do. They say, why not? And they look around and they find some boutique grower or something like Renner that will contract grow for you, and you can grow mesquite trees if that's what you want, is more of a dry land South Texas tree. Well, I don't think we need to introduce Ratama, Huisache, and those trees. They're going to be here. Okay, next one. So people are always looking for street side trees that are of a decent scale. I think another place for y'all to look is the Miller development. I know what they were after, and they were after something that would grow up fast and give the street tree look, but bur oaks planted too close together can't be a bur oak. They just can't be that majestic, broad, muscular, gnarly branching. And so they've all limbed them up, and they're well taken care for, but was that really the best tree, for there? And they also did some lace bark elms, which are terrible because, they blow out, their crown spreads and then they crack off, just like Bradford pears. So please, folks, let a tree be what it is. Don't try to shoehorn it into a site where you have to limb it up like crazy. I've seen people do that with juniper trees, where they limb them up like a popsicle. It just looks weird. Let them be what they are. Next slide. These are Lacy Oaks that I planted about 10 years ago, really small trees for a neighbor in my neighborhood. I think they're a really good tree. excuse me, go back to the ones before. Those are Mexican plums and they're lovely, but keep in mind, they only live about 20, 25 years. So I think having them there is good, but maybe not depending on the whole row of them, unless you are willing. There's nothing wrong with replanting a tree. I mean, that's when it's a short-lived tree, that's what you do. But just be aware.
We have a question. We have Stephanie raising her hand to ask a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise that Shannon Bradley has asked a question because of what you were stating about these trees. She asks, so what street side would you suggest? I think maybe you meant street tree.
Yeah, street tree. Well, Lacy Oak is really good. Cedar elm is good. Even Yopon hollies, they can be trimmed. You know, they can be shaped. That's fine. And I'm going to show you another one. This is going to be a real challenge to. It's a native tree, but nobody grows it. And it's a wonderful sized tree. Next slide. And then that's Lacy Oak. Next one. Next slide. See it close up. It has these waxy gray-green leaves that are just beautiful. And it's a prolific acorn producer, so easy to regenerate. And another friend of mine just planted a bunch off of East 11th Street around his office, and they're just gorgeous. Next to a building where they're not flat on one side, they're not over the sidewalk, knocking somebody's hat off, that kind of thing. And maybe building a repertoire of more of these smaller trees would be a good thing to do. But those are the ones that I would have: redbud, Lacy Oak, Mexican plum, and because I don't think the wispy trees like desert willow and those make good, they like to spread and sprawl, and they don't make a good street tree. But that's a good project to get a whole bit more. And some of the other ones I know are small trees. Mexican buckeye, they're not really tall, you know, they're more of a big shrub. And that brings a question, like, this is a book, what is a tree? Is a shrub that grows taller than 15 feet, can that be called a tree as well as a tall shrub? And so this book is wonderful. It's called Texas Trees by Benny Simpson. He was one of my mentors. This book is really good because it has a lot of study of the natural range of Texas trees, and a lot of really good maps. And I just want to put a pitch in for those old field guide books. I know people have digital guides and stuff, but if you can find some of these used field guides or even printed today, Texas A&M has a really good series of trees of Central Texas, and books can offer you more thoughtful commentary and more personal experience in a book than often a tree ID thing on your phone. You can take a picture of a tree and its fruit and its location, and then go back to your book or go back to the computer. But just a computer alone, I think, is going to limit you. So I encourage you to either at TreeFolks probably has a library building anyway, and if you do, I might even give some books to it someday, because I think people gotten unused to books for field guides. So
yes, we do have a library at TreeFolks, and we would love to give urban forest steward graduates access to those books. And I didn't hear you mention, what is this tree that we're looking at right now?
Lacy Oak, that's a close-up. Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. Cottonwood. This is not a great picture because I should have taken it from the other side, but in any event, this is a weird tree just growing out of the sidewalk. I think there must have been a tributary of Waller Creek or something there, but I love cottonwoods. They're not a good yard tree because they get huge, and they like to self-mulch like pecan trees do. When in the heat of the summer, then they'll have all their fallen limbs and stuff and drive people crazy. But there's a reason for that. But if you are going to plant on stream banks that aren't just solid rock stream banks, getting cuttings from local cottonwood trees, they're really easy to root because they have natural rooting hormones in that, like willows do. And they're almost all gone from the waterways. if you're driving out west on 71, you'll see them in the bar ditches and stuff, but never on the creeks. Sycamores you'll see, but these, they love the predators love this tree, but it has so much wildlife value. It's fast growing and it's easy to root on stream banks. So there are nurseries I know that have gathered and grown from cuttings from these trees, and you would need to partner with them. Medina Growers, and Medina is one. I got some because I didn't want cottonwoods from somewhere else, you know, and so I got, they produced a lot of cottonwood seedlings after the Blanco flood. When was that? 2018, something like that, and reused them for restoring stream banks in Hayes and Blanco County. So I put in a plug for cottonwoods. They're much maligned. This one is just not in a great place, but I love looking at it all the time. So next slide. Also one I like is post oaks. All of our post oaks, especially around this in central Austin and west over to Deep Eddy and around Camp Mabry and all of that, they're all in decline. They're they're from a relic forest. They used to come down this little finger of the post oak savanna. And Travis County's in 4 vegetational zones. So what you're going to tell somebody on the Lakeway side of town is not going to really matter or be as appropriate on the east side of town, because there's 2 different zones around the Balcones Escarpment. And that's a real important thing, because to tell people why you'll see different things. Even on the east side, I see sweet gums and stuff that people planted there doing okay, and they wouldn't do good in Westlake, even without the deer. So I have a soft spot for post oaks, and they're just all aging ancient trees now, and they just get sicker and sicker looking, and then they're gone. This is in front of Baker School. Next slide.
Jill,
We
you
have-
have a question from Stephanie?
Yeah, I wanted to read one from the chat. Alice Marcom asked, who was the author of that Texas Trees book that you mentioned?
Benny Simpson, and it's Texas A&M Press. No, it's not. It's Texas Monthly Press. Can you believe that? A long time ago. Field Guide to Texas Trees. You'll have to go to Half Price Books, hpb.com, and ask, and they get them in, and you just have to look there. I don't know. My book's out of print too, and it's like ridiculously expensive, but keep looking and you might find one at hpb.com. Or in our library. I'm sure this book's in the library too. So here's a post oak in a yard. They're real gnarly. They overwhelm a house, but they're magnificent trees, and they were really important throughout the ages in Texas to people and animals. All right, let's go to the next one.
Oh, shit.
Okay, another bad picture. This is Escarpment chokecherry that a friend gave me, and it's in my front yard, leaning away from a pecan tree. But it is a beautiful, narrow, delicate tree, 40 to 50 feet, Escarpment chokecherry, and it has dangling flowers that are fragrant, and then cherries, so birds love it. And it turns bright yellow in the fall. These are vanishing from the hill country from drought and browsing. So introducing some of these trees in the city, a bird might carry them off and plant them somewhere. And that way, that's kind of an extra bonus. But I didn't want another huge tree in my yard, but I did want something on the east side. So this isn't ideal to have a tree that leans, but probably part of my neighbor's pecan tree will fall someday soon anyway, so it'll be all right. But I just want to put in a pitch for this, because as citizen scientists, y'all will be the ones searching for the other trees and putting demand to growers, or learning how to grow them yourself, or finding the person who just wants to grow trees but not sell them or whatever. And that would be a really good thing. I see Elizabeth has a question. Let's see what she has to say. Jillian, do you see that?
We had a question before that. Tammy was asking about the cottonwoods. Are you recommending an eastern cottonwood?
Yes, yeah, that's the one that's over, that comes this far west.
Okay, and then Shannon asked, what about American Beautyberry?
But that's not a tree. That would be a tall shrub if you never pruned it. I'm not counting that. I'm calling that a shrub.
Okay, and then Elizabeth McGreevy said post oaks are in decline because yard mowing reduces chance for new trees to grow up. Actually, this could be applied to all city trees.
Exactly.
And worse, people gravel scape their yards around post oaks, and this causes them to die. They hate having soils around them disturbed.
Yeah, they hate compaction. They don't produce acorns every year. I finally got a crop from a tree at our place in Llano, and I grew about a dozen trees.
Oh, ha, ha, ha.
Excuse me. Okay. And they stayed 2 inches tall for 3 years because they were putting in their roots. Once I put them in the ground, I didn't even think they'd live because they were just really small on top. Then they started to grow. So many of our trees are like this, and you need to tell your folks that are getting a tree from you that give it 3 years, and that will be anchored, and then it will make the top growth. That's a survival mechanism that many trees and shrubs developed here. They couldn't afford to support all that top growth if they didn't have a good root system. So that's it. All right, let's keep going to the next one. This is a bur oak, but this is a bur oak from a huge relic forest of bur oaks on the South Concho River near Cristobal. I went on this ranch with the owner and a couple of people 10 years ago, and it was fantastic. It was an old Indian campground too, because there were all middens and things on this riverbank, but it was pecans and bur oaks. And the county agent there, the Texas AgriLife guy that I was with, said that they used to have 4-H kids come and gather the acorns and take them to nursery to be grown because they'd be more heat tolerant and drought tolerant. But then that program ended. But this is the kind of thing we need, is to get Eagle Scouts and TreeFolks people and people like that to go out there during a good year and gather acorns and ask local growers, will you grow this tree? And then you're not going to have a bur oak that's from East Texas grown in a nursery by Houston. You see what I'm saying? So I can put somebody in touch with someone to figure out how to get these acorns if that ever becomes of interest. But that's the kind of strategies we need going forward. Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah, we have another question in the chat. Is escarpment choke cherry the same thing as escarpment black cherry?
Yes, it's a subspecies of the black cherry. And it's a one, there's black cherry will grow in East Texas too, but this one is sort of just on limestone soils. Okay, so let's go to the next slide.
I just want to jump in just briefly to say we are considering starting this process. We're actually actively in the process of the Seeds to Trees pipeline. And so we're doing volunteer seed collection and distributing seeds to growers, sapling growers, and then distributing those saplings to our 5-gallon growers. And so that's something that we're actively, we'd love for you to be a part of it as well. So
I think this is so important. What I've been mainly trying to do at my place in Llano is grow the grasses, the native grasses. They were hammered. Mason and Llano County were notoriously some of the most abused in the state. But I have found that for grasses, the only ones I have success with are the ones that are local ecotypes or close to it. So I always have a custom list. I never buy over-the-counter grass seed mixes. I make my own mix. I get a lot of help with that, but I finally have our mix. So I think the same is with trees, especially if we're not going to be able to irrigate them forever. First, natural recruitment, and then ecotypes is going to be the best ammo we have for climate change. So establishing new vegetation. Okay, next one. This is a tree that's rare in Texas, but it's just delightful. It's a Linden tree or Carolina basswood. It only grows in about 4 or 5 counties in central Texas, and then it grows a lot in the eastern piney woods. But you know, when the forest receded as the climate changed in over time, some of these canyons, like at West Cave, were just these little microcosms of some of the combination of species that used to be more prevalent in the woodlands there. So this next slide, this is a linden tree basswood. It's a beautiful, fragrant tree. It's in its own little family, and it's about 40 feet tall, which is perfect for a yard. But nobody grows it, and but it could be a very special challenge to grow this. This tree's never. I guess it gets irrigation from the grass. It's in my neighbor's yard, and they had this very eccentric gardener for years who put smoke trees and all kinds of interesting, weird stuff in their yard, and so this was one of them. But this is just a fun thing to think about. It's hard to grow. Seed has double dormancy and things like that, but somebody could figure it out, and then they'd be really valuable. This kind of reminds me of, we'll go to the next one. This is one of the last ones, but this is Possuma Holly, and I think we should be using that a whole lot more. And wouldn't it be wonderful if you could get orange, yellow, and red cultivars of this and plant them together and have them all sucker up together? And so you'd have this display that would be unbelievable and last all winter. So, and it's easy to grow, but we don't want to take the risk of having overuse of the same cultivar selection, because that's just going to lead to disaster and of dieback. Some kind of disease is going to come in. So we need to get more genetic diversity in these popular trees and shrubs, because we're just getting clones, and that's not good. And this tree, this is a tall shrub. It can get 30 feet tall, but it's thought of as just a shrub. So it can be limbed up, but it suckers out. So where would be a spot for that? You know, in the back of a yard or something like that, or on a woodland trail. So I think that would be a good one too. And that's kind of along with mountain laurel. Is it a tree or a shrub? Let's see what's some other ones I had. Yeah. So you can diversify your repertoire by giving another look at some of what you might have thought was just a shrub. Wafer ash could make a tall shrub, but I don't think it's really a good tree, really. It's more of a big, rounded, crowned shrub, tall shrub. Eve's necklace is a nice tree, but it suckers too. So, and if you have a thicket of it or a grove of Eve's necklace, it's the most beautiful thing in the spring. But if you want your grass to come right up to the trunk of it, you're not going to be happy. So that's the kind of the information you want to share. Okay, so one more slide.
We have another question about mycorrhizal fungi.
Yeah.
Okay, so Elizabeth asked, with transplanting and germination, have you experimented with adding soils with visible mycorrhizal fungi to boost soil biology? I dug up an ash juniper that was 3 inches tall. It didn't grow much for 3 years. Then I replanted it and added a handful of fungi-rich, looks like cobwebs in the soil.
Yeah.
It is now more vigorous and 12 inches tall, but I'm not sure if it was the aeration that happened when it was transplanted or the fungi or both.
You know, that is a really good question, and one that I don't have a convincing ironclad answer to. I have inoculated soil with planted things like golden ball lead tree. That's another small tree that's beautiful and should be used that. And I did not have visible mycelia, but I had just native soil, and so that seemed to make a big difference. Also, I found when we're planting in parks, even before providers started having composted mulch, we would always mix dillo dirt in with the mulch And we saw a big difference there between a tree that had mulch only or a tree that had dillo dirt on top that was then used like compost tea as you water through it. So I think inoculating the soil, I don't even know what fungi, I couldn't identify what fungi would go with that tree. But if I have some native soil and mulch and dillo dirt, if I want to give it the extra boost, that has a visible difference in all the park trees. And at our park, at Peace Park, and also at my neighborhood park, we always do that now as our practice, because we've seen how it made the tree stronger, more resilient, and the fuller canopy. So thank you for that question. But I wouldn't put a burden on the public to find that, fungi rich soil, because that'll be like too difficult at first. But this other way they can see the benefits of it. And then if they're motivated, they want to go to the next level and gather some of the duff under a cedar tree or juniper tree or something like that, it's really worth it. Likewise with native grasses, bunch grasses like little blue stem, where I'm trying to reintroduce colonies that were great browsed out. I always put them on the east side of a live oak tree under the drip line, because it's more fungal there, and they always at the edge, they're in the sun, but they're always more robust. And I've never had it come up from seed. I just put plugs there every year and hope it'll take off. So it's fungal relationships really. And do y'all know that book, Searching for the Mother Tree by Suzanne Simard? I figured you would, but it's the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia are not very much like what we have here, but the idea is the same. And it's a very moving, it's pretty nerdy. So I'll just tell you that it's pretty science-based, which is great, but it's really unlocked another perspective on what makes trees grow and what am I looking at. So let's go to the next one. So this is just some fall foliage. It's what we like about trees. This is the thicket of cedar elms, post oaks, and live oaks and hackberries. And sometimes we get so focused as new learners on naming our trees and becoming experts on identification, but we don't see the forest for the trees. We now know with Dr. Simard and some others that trees have a relationship to each other, and they'll actually thrive when that relationship is recognized or acknowledged. I don't mean dissected, analyzed, and all that, but you just notice which trees are doing better in relation to others. And that gives you points to how you should plant trees to have that same effect. Not like lollipops in a row or whatever, not under a power line, not under a big tree, live oak that's going to crowd them, but this ripple effect of trees just on a glade like that. That's naturalistic design. And then it has its own kind of system right there to take care of each other. The trees do self-mulching, supporting, protection from predators, dropping limbs to protect the seedlings, all those things. An architecture for birds to perch on and deposit more seeds, all of those things. So and take a moment when you're walking around. We have so many opportunities here in Austin to go to West Cave, what's the one off 360, Wild Basin, the LCRA Park on 71, the LCRA parks up in North Travis County, Hampton's Pool, the Wildflower Center, on and on and on. Just take walks there and ask yourself, what am I looking at? What am I seeing? What's on the north side of this hill? What's on the west side? How is that a really big specimen, or is it normal because it's happy? Those kinds of things. You don't have to have the answer. You just have to be paying attention. And the more your mind gets trained to notice things, and you will receive, and the more you'll understand. And you may not know the answer, but you'll have the question better defined. And that's what's important as teachers to say to folks you're helping. I may not know that, but I know where to look, and I'll find out for you. I'll get back to you. That's because you want your people to feel like they know more after talking to you than they thought they did. Not how much you know, what an expert you are, but their own intuitive relationship to trees and nature. You're going to affirm that, and they'll know more than they thought they did. Does that make sense? And then they'll want to be hungry for more knowledge. Next slide. And that's me going onward through the fog. And I can stop here. This is my last slide, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And also, if you have questions after this, you can get my email. It's just really simple. It's my name. It's jill@jillnokes.com. And I'll try my best. If I don't know the answer, I know where to find it. So thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored to be talking with folks like you that are going to devote a lot of your time to helping others. We have so many new people moving here, so many young families. We can get them involved in being stewards of our parks and our public spaces and their own yards. It's not just only their own yards, but the public spaces, because that's going to build community, and it's going to be more sustainable too. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Jill. Just want to just open up the opportunity in case anybody has any questions, like Jill mentioned.
Yes, I do. I have a question about the loquat trees that you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify that when we do plantings in like public parks and wild spaces, we do native tree plantings. But when we give away free trees for folks to plant in their yard, a lot of people request fruit trees. So we do mainly give out native species, but we do give about, 30% well-adapted fruit trees like peaches and pecans.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you would say a little bit more about the loquat, because I knew that it wasn't a native species, but I had never seen it have any invasive tendencies before.
Yeah, if you look waterways where it's a little bit protected, it's sort of like Chinese Photinia, Nandina, the horrible Chinese pistachio. They're the ones that are clogging our waterways. Loquat is not the worst, but if there's a substitute, since our native species are under so much pressure, I would just always plant a native tree. And pecan is good. Like you said, why can't we plant a pecan? And that's not good for every yard because it's huge, but the loquats from Vietnam, Southeast Asia, and all of that. And you say a fruit tree, but who really makes loquat jelly? Answer me that, or wine. I don't. It's a good screening tree, but the ones from the snowpocalypse of last year, 2021, they still look terrible because they're frozen back. So I just don't think it's a high value plant at all. If I had one in my yard and I wanted to screen my neighbor's garage, I'd use it, of course. I'm not that much of a purist, but if you're introducing a tree, I just want to advocate for our native trees. So I'm not criticizing so much as inviting you to find a better alternative.
That's awesome. Thank you for that response. That reminds me that earlier somebody had mentioned in the chat that the Mexican white oak seemed to do really badly in the freeze. And that was in response to the question about, would you recommend planting more trees from central and southern Mexico in order to deal with higher temperatures and climate change?
Well, let's, I'm so glad you brought that up because I meant to say something. And this comes under the title of we can overuse trees. And the Mexican white oak has been a great park tree, but there's a lot of genetic variability, and it really hybridizes like crazy. So you don't know really what you're working with. We've planted them, they're nice size, they have a really nice round crown, they don't have disease, but you might get some weak ones in there. I'm not saying don't plant it, because I've been to the one site in Texas where it is off the Devil's River, and we probably think Native peoples brought acorns up from across the river. As this is just west of Uvalde. And it was in a box canyon, and that's where it is, but nowhere else. So in northern Mexico would be, there are a lot of plants that we're starting to use in the trade from northern Mexico, but not the central highlands. So we're not going to have that climate or those volcanic soils or anything. So you have to know when you say Mexico and Central America, no, that's a whole different biome, okay? There are some things like the Mexican white oak, Mexican sycamore, but it hybridizes like crazy. I know you've seen that, where some trees have those really big felty white leaves and some look half and half. Tex-Mex is what I call all of them, because you don't know. And if you've ever been to the Home Depot at Miller, where they planted solid Mexican sycamores in their parking lot, and then they had to limb them up. They look like ghost trees. They look like white totem poles with a few big leaves flapping at the top, like a flagpole. So where do you plant them? How do you manage them? And can they just be the tree they want to be, you know? I wouldn't plant an American sycamore because it gets diseases in the summer. And that's why that hybrid vigor is good. But, you know, that's how you can learn, just paying attention in the parking lot, see what's there. And then you'll say, that's still a good tree. Maybe not in this spot. Yeah.
A question about the Bodark tree. Somebody said that was one of their favorites. What did you think about it?
I love the Bodark. They used to plant it to make fence rows and things, and it's such a hardy tree, good for wildlife. You probably wouldn't want it in your yard, but I got one time, they had a bumper crop, and I threw about 100 Bodarks all around our woodlands to see what would they do, but I didn't get anything to happen. But it could be a good reclamation tree, but nobody's going to grow it. And it doesn't like to grow in a can because it's got this weird taproot that goes down and then it coils, gets root bound. But I love Bodark. I don't know. I think it'd be hard to transplant. I have not tried, but wherever it is, it has value, even though it's thorns and ridiculous grapefruit size fruit. Yeah. So yeah, I like that tree, but I don't see it becoming a big favorite, unfortunately.
And also we had a comment recommending the use of the big tooth maple, a native tree with good fall color.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful tree. It's not very abundant. It likes to grow on the north side of canyons. So you would want to have it as almost an understory tree. It can get tall, but it wouldn't do good on the west side or a pavement exposure or something like that. But, and you know, the issue is, how do you get that into production? How do you get enough seeds of that ecotype in the Sabinal, around Sabinal, and then grow it in Central Texas? That's the barrier there, not the tree. You know, and when we see you don't have mesquite on your list, because we always think of mesquite as a bad tree, just like Elizabeth could tell, we always think of the ash juniper as a bad tree. We want to put everything on the tree, not on the land use practices that gave the advantage to a very assertive pioneer species to take over. It's not the tree, it's how the land was treated that favored the monoculture of these trees. Whitebrush is the same. So it's a bigger question than, it's like I tell people, the hackberry, you would never plant it as a landscape tree, but if you've got one in your alley, don't cut it down, because it has so much wildlife use. It's for butterflies, it's a host plant, mockingbirds love the fruit, etc. So it's not that it's maybe in the wrong place, and it's not a strong tree, it's going to drop limbs, but don't cut it down and think it's a bad tree. It's in a bad place. Yeah.
We also had a question about a tree that I've never heard of. They said, what are your opinions on a Sierra oak?
I don't know what that is.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know what that was either. And then the next question was, what do you think about the honey locust? The one in my backyard is tough as nails and provides abundant pollen for bees in the spring.
Well, in some places that is a really popular park tree, along with the robinia, which is, yeah, honey locust. And you can get thornless varieties, which I think is good because they have very vicious thorns. Sometimes to me, where I see them mostly is like in New Mexico and places, and they look fine, but not majestic. So if you have one, enjoy it. It's just, they planted some at Peace Park, but they're not looking great. So that's all I can tell you, what I've seen. And some people they can't find big tooth maple, so they plant Shantung maple. So I don't know. In the yard, why not play around, but not on the greenbelt.
Yeah.
My view, but.
Okay, I have a question from Sal about lots of developers these days are planting strictly live oak trees after compacting and clear cutting. Is this an okay practice, or are there possible negative side effects of this? Higher importance for homeowners to plant more tree varieties?
That's what I think, because one, live oaks are cheap, relatively speaking, because a lot of places grow them, but which one are they growing? Are they growing the coastal live oak? Are they growing the Central Texas live oak? The same with red oaks. Are they growing the Shumard red oak? Are they growing the Spanish red oak? We don't know, unless you have a reliable grower like Native Texas Plants or something like that, or Conrad used to be a guy like that, or Joss Growers or Renner, or somebody that's looking at the provenance of these trees. So let's say he plants 8 trees in a row. There's so many things that could go wrong with them. Oak wilt could come through and take them all out. They could crowd each other and look like crap. They could make a dark cave where nothing else can grow underneath them, and the root zone is buckle sidewalks and stuff. So, but until that property is sold or something, that developer can check that box on his list and get his certificate of occupancy, and he's out of there, right? What does he care? Whereas you, urban stewards or forestry stewards, you're looking to the future. That's the bedrock of your gesture of optimism. So you're not looking for the short-term payoff. You're looking for a solution that would go through a lot of weather cycles, a lot of compaction, whatever it meets in the urban setting. So you're not going to have a guarantee. We don't know, but you want to hedge your bets and have something that has the best chance for thriving with a minimum of maintenance, but which will be there for a long time to provide shade and carbon sequestration, I think, for a lot of people that you're never going to see. So I always, when weighing something like that, that's what I go to. I'd rather have a smaller tree on the sidewalk, like a golden ball lead tree, or something like that, than a big live oak that's just going to be dark, too many of them, and a blur. I mean, that's not even the worst thing about it, but the worst thing is, in a tight spot, there's just not going to be enough room for their roots and things. Anything else? There's 77 things on the chat. I'm not looking at them because I get distracted, but
able to ask all the questions that folks asked in the chat. So I think that we're
Okay.
able to move on.
And I think it's 30 minutes already. So, right?
How about a round of applause for Jill, everybody? Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And let me know if I can answer any more questions after you had a chance to digest everything.
And just a reminder then, your email is jill@jillnokes.com.
Yes.
Great.
And I don't have my website anymore. I folded my tent, and all the, I used to keep a blog about the restoration work there, and I might I might put up a website just with the archive of those, but I do want to say, if you want to see some videos that I produced for the Hill Country Land Trust, just go to YouTube and just type in Hill Country Land Trust, and we did a series of stewardship videos there on best practices and things. And I brought together some awesome teachers. So wonderful to have them. And it's just an approach, even though you're in a city, it still has really good messages for how to teach people to stop a minute and again, say, what am I looking at? And then come up with your plan and your objectives from there. So just go to YouTube and Hill Country Land Trust, and you can see those videos too. Have a good evening, have a good rest of your afternoon, and congratulations to new graduates. And I look forward to keeping up with what all you're doing.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I figure, so we've got 2 more items on the agenda for today. We're going to be hearing about Stephanie Simmons' UFS project and work that she's been doing since she graduated. And we're also going to go through and do the graduation ceremony. And I figured this would be a good opportunity. If anybody, let's take a couple minutes. If anybody needs to use the restroom or anything, Stephanie, if that's okay, we'll take just a few minutes to give people a chance to use the restroom if they need. And then we'll get back in so we can hear more about your project and your work. Let's meet back here. Let's say 3 minutes, okay? Give folks just a little bit amount of time. That was my chair. That was my chair, I promise.
I was like, oh.
I should put the video on mute, but I swear that was the chair. Give people
It's
about
like
a
crunch.
minute more. Yeah.
Can you slide down to the
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
next?
All right. Okay, well, I think that's been enough time. Hopefully people will make their way back in if they haven't already, or at least they will during the introduction. So,
All right.
so our speaker for this
You want to
segment,
slide?
yeah. I'll just introduce you just really quick.
Oh, okay.
Our speaker is Stephanie Simmons. She is a 2015 UFS graduate, and today she's going to be covering her neighborhood welcome packets and the importance of 40% canopy cover. She's an urban forest Steward graduate. You've already got your bio. Thank you. Okay, Stephanie.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Actually, I really appreciate being invited today because I've been so out of the loop. I am normally totally involved with the new stewards throughout the class. And I wanted to show everyone how much fun we can have as a group. Here's a picture of us from the 2020 class. So hopefully I'm going to put a couple plugs in here. Our new students, our new graduates will be starting to do some more in-person things and start to have some fun together, because this is a fun organization. We do have fun. We build the community as during our planting and caring for trees. So we are actually the epitome of the mission. So a little background about me, and I'll try to keep my whole set short, but at the end we'll take some questions, but I am always available for the stewards. So I will share all of my contact information, not on this because it's going to be recorded, but through other emails and stuff. But essentially, I'm a reformed tree killer because I did grow up in the snow belt and we did heat our house with wood. So we did a lot of tree cutting and harvesting. And so it took a while when I came down to Texas and thought, why are the trees so short and people kill them all the time? We need, I was like, whoa, we need trees down here. And so in 2015, I took the Urban Forest Steward course, which was held jointly that year with the City of Austin's Wildlife Habitat Steward course, which was fabulous to have them both together. And so some of the people who are on today's call are some of my cohorts. But since then, I've gone through many iterations of different projects, and I'm really excited to just get you guys started, because it can be overwhelming to feel like you have to hand in a project. And the idea is you're only really answering to yourself in your own schedule and your passion. So I understand, because when I worked, it was really hard to take on a big project, right? So I want to show everyone, and it doesn't matter what kind of steward you want to, you are, whether you're an urban forest steward or a wildlife habitat steward, the welcome packet. So it's a good starter project. And from there, you can kind of get a feel for how much you can contribute, how much time you can give. And it really gets you started without a big commitment. But then I want to go over literally just started my 40p tree canopy project, which is way more advanced. But I hope that it's something that at a base level, everyone can understand if they want to pick it up. It doesn't have to be too scientific, but I will show you some of those scientific. Oh, I went to move my slide. I need next slide. So the welcome packet, and I will, again, I have this already in an email. This I'll have Ben send out to you. So it's already, what we're seeing is a slide, but I have the contents in a kind of a canned way where you can pick it up and take and use it. Essentially, it's a pre-assembled packet that you keep an eye out for new members or new neighbors or whomever you may run into, even if they're an existing neighbor and you want to say, hey, I'm a new steward, so here's what I'm doing. It allows you to be very, very structured in how you do it. Like even if someone moves in and you don't have time, you're on vacation, you don't have to do it, right? So it's self-paced to meet your needs as a new steward. You can also customize it. Essentially, I'm gonna, these two things that we see in the images are the base, what I consider the base packet, along with your cover letter. But you can always add, like, I'm a preserve side neighbor, so from the City of Austin, I slide in some preserve side information. It's also, so it's got the educational material, but it's very expandable. So again, you can say, hey, I know they're going to cut these trees down over here, here's some trees that are going to, here's on the guide, what do you think about us getting together and putting in some trees to compensate for the tree loss we just have? So it's basically, it breaks the ice with your neighbors. It welcomes them. And if you read the, I'm not sure if you can read it because it's kind of small here, but basically the idea of capturing new neighbors is most people move in and they want to do something to their landscape or make changes. And that's the time to capture them and get them to go with the right tree, right place concept, and also the native plants that are listed in the native and adapted plant guide. So if you look on the bottom here, you have the, I'm trying to hide my, hang on a sec. How do I, well, I can't read it. I can't read the bottom of my screen, but that's fine. See, so essentially there's going to be a cover letter. You can customize it to whom you know, who you are, but basically it's dear neighbor, I'm here for your resource. You basically introduce yourself, offer your assistance, and then make sure you provide the contact info, however you like to be contacted. In addition to the Grow Green Network native guide, the city of Austin, and I don't know if we have anybody who's not from Austin on the call, but our city puts out this wonderful Grow Green guide, and it has native and adapted plants. If you notice, I scratch out adapted because I'm a native person. Because of my pure experience, I have, as we just heard Jill talk about, I have a Chinese pistache because at the time it was considered adapted. Well, now it's invasive. So I just, after this learning experience, said, nope, I'm just going to go native. Adapted plants adapt too well and become invasive. So just to avoid those. And then the native tree growing guide, one of the key things I want to share about this guide is everyone thinks when you hand it to them, people, that it's like, oh, it's so, you know, you just giving me junk. Open it up, show the poster. And I don't know, you could be 2 years old or 100 years old. People's eyes just go, because that's something they can take home. They can put on their wall. It has on the very bottom to help new people. It has the tree sizing scale. So it helps people recognize, oh, I know what this size tree, you know, the tree in my front yard is one of these. And so it helps people understand when they're choosing to plant new trees, how big the tree will be relative to something they already know. So that's definitely something, open it up. So people will be like, oh, I don't need stuff. But yeah, and that everyone you give it to is going to be amazed at that. And so the other material, just to make it fun, like if you know if somebody's coming in with school kids, their young age, you know, the city also has promotional stickers and things like that. Think Trees, like the TreeFolks has a lot of stickers, so you can find that. And so basically you're making a welcome packet, and it's the best way to make a good impression on your new neighbor and influence their decisions as they adjust to the new neighborhood. Whoop. I'm not in control. Slide, please. There we go. So that the welcome packet's a great starter, a starter project. And so remember, do not be afraid. I've been doing this for 7 years. And what I have this next year and probably forever now, from now on, my new project is the 40p tree canopy. So my ultimate goal when I do any kind of thing, it's educate people, and I missed that on my first slide, but educate, inspire, and empower. So people need to learn about what the importance is of the trees are. You know, you're doing your education piece. That's where your resources are going to come in that we talked about in the packet. Then you're going to inspire people to recognize their own need. You know, people go, oh yeah, I can solve this. This is a problem. Like your tree's about to go, you know, like you have a Bradford pear. It's not going to last another 2 years, whatever that may be. You're going to want to start thinking about a succession tree. So you kind of give people that concept of, you can solve this problem. So you essentially, then the empowerment is giving them the resources that they need to act on this plan, which is custom to their particular situation. So in this one, the 40p tree canopy, there was a study that came out in 2019 by Carly Zeider, and I'll briefly talk to you about this, but it's what we always knew, but now if some people need to hear that it's been researched and there's a study and they need to see charts. And so what you see on the bottom of this slide is this is literally out of her presentation. And again, I'm going to send you guys all of the study in support of all this. But the best takeaway, and this is from her words, we found that to get the most cooling, you have to have about 40% canopy cover, and that was the strongest around the scale of a city block. So the idea is to reduce the urban heat island effect. People can really, it's not a fatalistic approach about climate change. It is, they can do stuff locally within their own lawn and their neighbors' lawns, anywhere between 30 to 90 meters, to make a big difference in this extreme heat that the Austin community is suffering. May, again, is on record. This 2022 is on record to be the hottest May. It's been year after year, every month, hottest on record, hottest on record. So the idea here is to show people that in the chart that this is from Carly's research paper, the vertical axis is the temperature change because the trees are transpiring. And if you can achieve a 40% tree canopy, what they're showing is the transpiration alone and the shade is literally reducing that extreme heat. And so that's what, and I can't see it, but on the bottom, that's percent, the x-axis, that's percent canopy. So these charts show, and I drew in the little red lines to show you the 50%. So you can literally see that, the heat does reduce. Now, again, this is all in scientific, degrees C. So it calculates, you'd have to do the conversion into Fahrenheit to help people see it. And again, 30 to 90 meters. And the next page we're going to show. So what we're doing right in this picture, we're educating people on, hey, you have a problem, there is a solution. So next slide. And I know this probably doesn't need to be said because we don't really need to inspire people to want to solve it, but this literally just came out in the Austin KXAN article, which will be linked. Austin is hitting 100-degree weather more frequently, and here's when it's most common. This was the KXAN article. What I did is I grabbed the literal chart from Camp Mabry, and for newbies, Camp Mabry's been the official Austin record keeping site. So it's the best. Yeah, and I highlighted on that the 2000. Mike is saying that 2011 drought was bad. It's not even. They didn't even take it was over 100 days, so they chopped the chart off at 90. So I wanted to, over to the right of the image, what we're seeing, and the black stuff is what I put on there. Since 2005 to 2022, look at that. I mean, I don't know why we have to convince people that it's getting hotter. When you look at this chart, it just shows it in pure numbers. I do know since we do have an influx of people coming into Austin, here's something that I did discover. People who moved in, I know someone who moved in right before that wet spring that we had last year. And they're like, this is great. I'm like, this is not normal, right? So last year in 2021, we had this like not super hot year. We had a super cool spring. And they actually do have the 2022 number counted so far down there on the lower right. But this is basically inspiring people to say, yeah, we need to address this problem. You can address it in your own lawn. This is not to say that as stewards, we won't be working on for the climate equity plans that the TreeFolks is working on, because that's where we'll do our our volunteerism, because they're doing plantings off your own property, right? We're going out to do that. But this is a way to say in your lawn and your neighbor's lawn and to the left, to the right, and behind you is definitely a way that individually people can approach the urban heat island effect. So that's hopefully going to inspire whomever you're talking to make the change. And next slide. So this is where we, as stewards, empower them. And this is where we bring our relationship with TreeFolks to bear, right? We make the problem solvable for each person, right? So one of the things when we're talking to them, first of all, this is 30 to 90 meters, right? So that's in scientific, nobody in America thinks in meters. So what is 30 to 90 meters? Generally speaking, if most people know the size of their lawn, their frontage, their lawn frontage. So that's 100 to 330 feet. And if you're talking to somebody who's a football fan, that's a 30-yard to 110-yard distance. So that helps put it in a scale, a realistic scale for them. Basically, it's a football field. Anybody who's within a football field of your house can help mitigate that urban heat island effect for you and your neighbors, okay? So one of the things that Google Maps has come out with recently is the ability to measure. I mean, it's always been there, a little bit hidden, but now it's quite simple. It's a right click. So on the lower left of this slide, I show that we have, and I happen to know this house, and I happen to know that TreeFolks literally did give them some trees that didn't survive. And now that I look at this, yeah, so I don't know if the number is big enough, but you can see the measurement that I put out there. That's 17 meters from their front door, out their front lawn to the next tree. So when you're looking at a radius, if this were to be drawn around in a circle, you can easily see that this homeowner does not nearly come close to the 40%, right? So these are the kinds of things that you can help your neighbors recognize. You need a tree here if you really want to help yourself from this heat. Where's your sunny spot? I mean, that's one way. It's pretty easy. You can kind of go, it's sunny here. We feel the heat, personally feel that heat when we get out of our car and walk through the front lawn. You feel it. But sometimes it's not in their yard. It's in their neighbor's yard, right? So we need to help them recognize, well, it's not here, but you really need your neighbor to help you out too. Sometimes it's not even in somebody it's the HOA's yard or the retail area. And going back to that education piece, if it is somebody that you don't necessarily have a personal relationship with, it gives you that scientific information to help you go approach them to address their areas that need more tree canopy. So what tree to plant, and this is what we've learned through our stewards class, is right tree, right place. And that's actually what Jill was just highlighting, is making sure that we plant trees that are, we don't have to continually hack at, or will never get tall enough to actually provide the shade needed, whatever it might be. And that's where that growing guide's going to come in handy. And the other thing that people who are new to Texas and Austin don't realize is you don't plant your trees in the summer. You plant them, the best time is in the fall. And in fact, the Texas, our Arbor Day is different than the rest of the country. It's the first Friday in November. So that really, I have planted trees that weekend, hardly ever need to water them. They did great. I planted trees this March, which is it's the end of the planting season. They both died. We had a drought. They couldn't get enough water. And I already know they're dead. It's only 2 or 3 months later, right? But the ones that we can get in the ground, the best time really is right at the beginning of the planting season. So that's where we promote the idea that TreeFolks has the Neighborhoods program. And we say to the people, you can get a free tree. So there's a couple limiting things. People don't know where to get the tree. They don't want to pay for a tree. And then they have to plant the tree. So we're going to help them as stewards say, well, I know where we can get a tree, and it's going to be free, and get them to sign up for the Neighborhoods program. And then the key thing is most people don't know how to plant a tree correctly. So by offering to help plant their tree doesn't necessarily mean you need to do all the hard work, but you really are there to help them do it correctly. Because I have a saying when I do the supervisor training, too high never die, too low never grow. These are little things that we'll be learning as we go through. As we get together more often, we'll start to hear some of our easy, cryptic messaging so that it's easy to remember. So don't forget, you can offer to help plant their tree. And no, I mean, very few times have I ever been, oh no, I'll do it myself. I mean, if someone's going to offer to help plant, dig dirt, they're always like, yeah, come on over. So next slide. And so this is my last slide. What's that?
Okay. Oh, I wanted to mention we're almost at time.
Yep.
And so people may have to contact you to learn the full breadth, but I do want you to walk us through this because this is really amazing.
Yes. So all I only wanted to show this as something because I have had some people, it's fairly easy to do a brief, like from a homeowner's perspective, the 30 meters, right? When you're looking at a larger scale, I really did find this helpful. There's iTree out there. It's come a long ways. It's not even a download, it's a web application. And essentially you can identify if your neighbors want to like, hey, give us the 6 houses. You give it the polygon, you can see this is just an example I started to play with, but it's called, so iTree is a consortium of the U.S. Forest Service, Davy Creek Tree Company, a bunch of big time tree managers, forest managers, but now they're getting into this community trees. So the iTree canopy is something that you can go out and I really found it very easy. It was 3 steps. Make the boundary box, then it basically is like, it's going to do the random sampling and you can get down to 1% of a standard error and everything's done for you. So I just want, I did have someone, well, prove to me where I'm less than, 40%. I'm like, well, how am I going to do that? But iTree does it. So the iTree canopy. So I want you guys to know that is out there. And this is just a little picture of where I left last weekend. So that's what I have. And I'm always available. I will be sending to Ben so he can send out all of my personal contact information. And I love to hear from everybody. Yeah, there's so many. So I gave you the scale. What you just saw is you can do some very starter kit, depending on how much time you have to commit. You can take it all the way to the point where you're doing actual canopy coverage, study, research to get people on board. So totally love. And by the way, we need to do our urban forest picnic this August. We haven't done it in 2 years. So that will be something I'll be working with Ben on because I can't wait to meet all the new stewards and see all my old friends. So that's all I have.
Yeah, thank you for the plug for that. Can't wait.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a great opportunity. So if folks have questions, they can reach out to you. I'm going to be sending out your contact info and they'll be able to connect with you. Okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to change the slides here. Going through, so if folks have questions, they reach out to you. Okay, you made it. Congratulations.
Comment in the chat from Mike Valescu saying, if any UFS grads want a project, I will have a sizable workday at Country Club Creek Greenbelt on June 18th. It's going to be exciting. Thank you, Mike.
I'm curious who here, if anybody wants to self-identify, who are our graduates for 2022? If you want to raise your hand, put a comment in the chat, or just come on to say, hey, how many of the graduates do we have here today?
Hey, I'm one.
Nice. I think I saw another here, I believe.
Yes, we have Shannon Bradley Reaver in the
So
chat.
happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shannon. And we also have Sal Tijarina and James Rogers.
Wow.
That's great. Yeah. So I want to take a moment, and if it's all right with y'all, I'd like to read a little poem. This is not one that I wrote. This is by Mary Oliver, but I think it captures the essence of what we're striving for or why trees are important. Don't mind, I'm going to read here. So this is When I Am Among the Trees by Mary Oliver. When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locusts, equally the beech, the oaks, the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself in which I have goodness and discernment and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me, the trees stir in their leaves and call out, "Stay a while." The light flows from their branches. And again they call, "It's simple," they say. And you too have come into this world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light and shine. That's when I'm among the trees by Mary Oliver. And so I guess that's all. Please congratulate me and please join me in congratulating the class of 2022 who steward the urban forests that help remind us why we have come into the world. Thank you, class of 2022.
Thank you.
So I just want to close with some announcements. Want to share with the graduates now some of the resources that are available to you, and also some of the opportunities to connect with TreeFolks and the greater community, the greater tree community going forward. For the resources that are available to you, we mentioned the Neighborhoods program, so you can have priority access to free trees for your projects within the city of Austin, and then slightly outside depending, but mostly for projects inside the city of Austin. That's free 5-gallon trees. And if you're interested, reach out to me. Also, you can have access to our hand tools for projects, shovels, rakes, mulch sleds. So if you have interest for those or need tools for your projects, let us know. If you have an event that you particularly want to promote or some activity that you want us to promote, send me a link. If you give me plenty of time, we can add it in our newsletter and maybe get it on social media. But just want to let you know the opportunities there. Jillian mentioned the library that we have. We have several books about trees, and definitely you're welcome, more than welcome to borrow those. And then lastly, I just wanted to offer too, just in general, our expertise. I mean, Stephanie is already donating hers, and we are happy to donate ours, and just to be a part of it and connect with you. And we can happy to make professional connections as well if need be. If you do projects out in the community, please let us know. We would love to know what you guys are doing after this class, how you're applying the knowledge. If you have any feedback for us about the course, we have a way to log projects or activities that you're doing, just so that we can stay in the know and see what the urban forest stewards are doing now that they've graduated. I'll be sending you your own personalized certificate, so that will be coming in the email shortly. I mentioned other ways to connect with TreeFolks and the local community. We've got Stephanie mentioned the Urban Forest Stewards Facebook group. It's a good way to join. There's a Tree Hugger Happy Hour group, which is a collection of people in the forestry industry who are always just interested to talk. So it's a great place if you want to learn more. If you're a young professional, I recommend joining our TreeFolks Young Professional group. Stephanie mentioned the supervisor. We have the volunteer supervisors who are planting supervisors who help us plant trees and manage volunteers at events. So if you're interested, contact volunteer@treefolks.org. We have 2 free volunteer supervisor trainings throughout the year. And lastly, I want to mention that we'll be hiring several positions in the coming months. So if you're interested in applying for those, please reach out to me, ben@treefolks.org. It's ben@treefolks.org, or visit our website, and we'll be posting those very soon. And I mentioned if you have any feedback about the course, please let me know. I'm happy to hear them. And that's all. That concludes the talk. Thank you everybody for coming out. I'll leave it open for a few minutes more if anybody wants to catch up or connect while we have the Zoom meeting with all of us together. But thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Can you
Ben.
stop sharing your screen, Ben, so we can see each other?
Yes, thank you.
And also, can everybody just unmute if that way, I don't,
I'm also going to go ahead and end the recording here. So.
Yeah.